Well, hello, and thanks for joining our podcast. I'm Blakely Thomas Aguilar, digital editor for VMware. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Thomas Squeo, CTO of Global Technology Partner Intrado. Thomas, your team has been through an absolutely massive digital transformation over the past 4 or 5 years, specifically for application and infrastructure modernization. So let's take it all the way back to the beginning. How did your team acknowledge that this was needed? And then how did you begin your transformation?
Because of the scope and scale of our company and the fact that we acquired quite a few businesses to be able to build our portfolio, we had the range of technology solutions from, kind of legacy monolith solutions all the way towards leading and bleeding edge solutions. And when I say leading and bleeding, it was primarily composite applications that were built over the cloud in that context. So in 2016, I was asked to explore how do we modernize our internal cloud, so to make it as attractive as our what we were seeing emerging in the marketplace, specifically around Amazon, as well as also Azure kind of coming up. And this was predating GCP being really a viable candidate. But what we started doing was looking at how do we make our own internal infrastructure as attractive to our product development teams as the external environment. So that was kind of the remit that I was given for being able to do that exploration. And in doing so, we really kind of looked at how do we reduce friction for our teams and being able to either provision infrastructure, be able to, take things from I'll call it inception to operations or order to cash in a very short period of time. And so what we wanted to be able to do is have a very opinionated platform in which we could actually enforce and ensure that the practices around software development were highly efficient, highly effective, and ultimately had a very much outcome-based focus. Whereas, what we saw with some of the other solutions where we would actually be able to kind of have a lot more optionality or a more operator focused, that didn't give us the advantage that we wanted to be able to get, either from a human capital perspective or just a practice and capability perspective. And then what we ultimately ended up having to do is make some decisions for ourselves to be able to go and say, hey, let's separate the application decisions from the platform decisions. And that gave us the ability to abstract not only in our own environment over the VMware, vSphere, and NSXT environments, but also looking at how do we put those environments into the big three clouds. So we were able to run our platform abstracted over AWS, Azure, and GCP. And it was, interestingly enough, by the time that we had made some significant pivots to a multi-cloud operating model, we made some business decisions early on for those applications that are running in our application service, pivotal application service. We really focused on those on our on-prem environments, and those environments that were actually going to leverage Kubernetes as a a way of bringing them into a cloud-native operating model. We encourage them to use public cloud in that environment. So that kind of had a bit of variability in our decision making as far as how we manage not only our public cloud team, but how our platform teams actually interoperated with them as well.
So to say that you've come a long way would be an understatement. You've got 4 years under your belt. Where are you today? And have any of the results surprised you in terms of value and opportunities?
So we've been able to get over 170 applications onto the platform at this point. We have a clear line of sight to the conclusion of what we want to accomplish in the original business case, as well as also kind of looking at, we as Intrado acquired about 9 companies since the original business case was submitted. And those, the portfolios of those 9 companies, as well as also initiatives that were spun up after the fact, are now going onto the platform as well and being able to realize those benefits around, speed, stability, scalability, a more secure environment with a more predictable threat surface, and then ultimately the software the business of software economics, or we could largely classify under the savings tier. And we actually evaluate every application in the portfolio along those dimensions, whether they're on platform or not, because now we have a standardized set of metrics in which we can actually report the health of an application, whether or not it's actually being built in an efficient manner. So it's very easy to be effective and costly, but we want to be both effective and efficient from what we consume.
Okay, so that brings up another great question. How do you make decisions on which legacy app is transformed, refactored, or retired? And then how do you manage that against the demands for new apps and systems?
Was really this kind of legacy set of applications where we had to be able to build a platform and product modernization and end of life strategy around. So really, out of the 400 applications that would be in those latter, the first and last category, you said, all right, there's 400 of these applications. About 160 to 200 of them are going to go away. They're going to be retired outright, and we're going to modernize the core set to be able to be in that go forward platform. So, those applications that were not addressable, you think about things like mainframe applications, you think about those applications that are, the juice would not necessarily be worth the squeeze, if you will. And not every application is going to be destined for the cloud in its current structure. And if you think about things like UDP applications, streaming applications, and so on and so forth, that technology set has evolved significantly since 2016. I mean, if you think about, in 2012, it was Twitter's Storm application, and now you're looking at things like Kafka and Confluent and things of that nature that are out there that are part of that ecosystem. So as what we found as we went through this is the original set of applications that we had identified for ourselves to carry forward, we tuned that got smaller at some points. It got, new applications got introduced, new initiatives where a set of applications or platforms were going to be built started to be incorporated into that. And ultimately what you see as you move through this process is that the original portfolio that you identified would be qualified not only on the language, tools, techniques, the capability of the teams that they would be participating in, but also what is the business value of that. So for example, we had some applications in our portfolio that were very data center intensive. They had, that you would have to make a significant amount of capital outlay for that. But as certain cloud providers had emerged and matured in their ability to be able to build low network latency applications over their cloud infrastructure, those became a viable option for us to be able to scale the organization and take a more variable cost model into things that were very core to our business. And that was where you see this kind of, I would say, very mutable set of applications that you could actually address in the platform. So, when we did our initial kind of qualification criteria, we worked with, in the enterprise architecture team, we worked with the technical leads and technical anchors across those teams. And then when we brought in the third parties from the balanced account team and others, when we qualified those applications, they were more validating or invalidating things as opposed to necessarily looking at things from a pure like, hey, we got to start from scratch. Each application is kind of a new set of discovery. And I think it's important to note that, well, not important to note, but it's an interesting little fact that how many companies would come to us, as a third party and be like, hey, we'll give you a free analysis of the appropriateness for something to go onto the platform. And it was like, look, man, we are so far downrange on this that we don't have time to talk about that kind of stuff. We are there. We are already working on this thing. And, it was interesting because, some of the vendors that were more self-aware would look at that and go, yes, we are not the right people for you. We're not early in this journey. We're very far down it.
Perfect. So when I've talked to other organizations making this massive shift, the technology is only part of the equation. A significant change that's needed is actually cultural and organizational, getting the right mindsets, the right skill sets, and the right operational model. Was that true for Intrado as well?
So what I've found in my career, and this is something that I think that many folks can attest to, is that technology is rarely the problem. It's the people, personnel, what's the culture around it, what's the acceptance of risk around things, how do you ensure people not, if they don't have the competencies on day one, what is the path for you to be able to either augment and supplement them or get them the professional development necessary so they can ultimately have that both intrinsic transformation as well as that extrinsic transformation of what's happening to the organization. One of the core shifts that really had to change for our company was the notion of we were no longer going to be an operator first organization. You had to have operators that were able to think like engineers and act like engineers, with a kind of not only a continuous bent for improvement on the platform, but really looking at how do we incorporate techniques that actually were, that were more, kind of, I would say, guidelines. For example, you had to be able to build swim lanes for folks to operate in when they were building their software, and then you had to build a culture of trust ultimately that gives them the latitude to be successful alongside without necessarily assuming things like somebody's going to try to get one over on the team or something like that. So if we think about, like, I kind of view the world in this, what is the the people, the process, the cultures, the competencies, and what then ultimately is the technology that you're going to be using it for to solve for the business problem. What is the use case you're then solving for? And then when you're thinking about that at scale, that means that the way that you've built the organization over time, your early iterations would be, kind of looking at things like span of control, looking at centralization, making sure that the right people are reporting, or right parts of the organization are reporting upward and to the and how they actually would work alongside each other.
And in this new operational model, combined with changes to the development model, IT structure, and the technologies themselves, how has all of this impacted the way Intrado and your teams look at enterprise security?
We're very, very much focused on how do we bring security as what I'll call far to the left in the value chain as possible. So we look at, kind of how do we instrument automated security testing? How do we understand good practices? How do we do post post deployment penetration testing? How do we implement things like a 3R model over our platform, in which we have the ability to, you know, not only rotate and repave environments, but essentially redeploy over top of them on a pretty regular basis that ultimately reduces the amount of time a bad actor can sit inside a system. We have implemented things like Cred Hub over our entire stack. So almost all of the credentials that are actually used to manage the platform or the applications therein are checked in and out by a library, and they only exist for about 6 hours. So you're not going to see somebody with a sticky note on their desk and the classic kind of human failings that happen in the security process. So security is obviously so broad and evolving from what organizations have to do to be able to maintain a good posture, that we had to be able to look at our practices for not only how we build our software and how do we ensure that things like threat surface is minimized at the point of inception and delivery, but then also what are the practices that happen as that software is deployed, operationalized, and then ultimately monitored, whether it be through logging, observability, kind of understanding threat conditions that go around and in and around it. So but yeah, so that's kind of my position on it. I mean, we are not a DevSecOps shop at scale yet, but it is our aspiration. And we look at we kind of look at the DORA capability model and capability models around what good practices are. And we've set ourselves up to have that, the most mature and most capable teams are those that are considering security at the point of inception, as opposed to after something's operationalized.
And that's a wrap for this podcast. I'm Blakely Thomas Aguilar. Thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks for Thomas Squeo of Intrado for sharing his team's journey and his really important perspectives on application modernization. You can learn more at intrado.com and vmware.com. Until next time.